Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you as we gather for this important webinar series on 100% electrified buildings and communities for Climate Governance Malaysia in collaboration with the US Embassy. It's also proudly supported by GreenPagesMalaysia and Malaysia Green Building Council. I'm honored to be your MC for this exciting event. So our aim is crystal clear: to enhance efficiencies at scale and pave the way for electrifying homes, commercial buildings, and communities across Malaysia. We recognize the urgency of addressing climate change and the pivotal role electrification plays in our sustainable future. So throughout the series, we'll tap into the expertise of leading voices in the field and gain insights into the practicalities of electrification. This isn't just about making technical adjustments, it's about shaping a greener and more eco-conscious Malaysia for generations to come. I encourage you to engage with the panelists, share your thoughts, and leave questions on the Q&A chat box, as this is an opportunity for us to learn from each other. Together, we can transform our communities and leave a lasting legacy for our environment. Thank you for being here, and let's make this webinar series a beacon of knowledge and innovation for climate governance in Malaysia. Now, let us pass the floor to Dato Seri Johan Raslan, Council Member of Climate Governance Malaysia and Director of Sime Darby Property. Over to you, Dato.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Malaysia, good evening from the United States, and good night from me in the United Kingdom, where I happen to be today. Warm welcome from Climate Governance Malaysia, and also from the US Embassy. I'll pass over to representative from the US Embassy in a second. Climate Governance Malaysia, just to let you know, if you're not aware, is the Malaysian chapter of the World Economic Forum's Climate Governance Initiative. And we are a network of non-executive directors of companies. And we aim to acquire the practical skills needed as long-term stewards of these businesses to help steer our companies through an effective climate transition strategy, and taking into account the need for financial stability, increased resilience, and of course, sustainability. We undertake a range of events and with the intention of raising awareness of the climate emergency that we all face, especially in our very vulnerable Southeast Asian region. Our events range from the compact and intimate like this one up to, frankly, involving hundreds of participants like our climate summit that we held just 2 weeks ago. Today, we in the Embassy of the United States of America embark on a remarkable series of discussions aimed at transforming the way we power our homes, condominiums, apartments in Malaysia. So it's really personable and I think relatable to each of us. As the series progresses, all of us will have the opportunity to get some valuable insights from experts, thought leaders, and innovators in this field from around the world, not just the US and not just Malaysia. I'm really excited to learn from the experts gathered today. Quite frankly, I can't wait. I don't want to use up any more of the minutes than I have to. So without further ado, let me hand right over to Grace Choi, Cultural Affairs Officer at the United States Embassy in Malaysia, to give her introductory remarks. Over to you, Grace.
Thanks, Dato, and good morning, everyone from the U.S. Embassy here in Kuala Lumpur. My name is Grace Choi. I'm the Cultural Affairs Officer in the Public Affairs section here. A huge thanks just to start off to Climate Governance Malaysia, and then also to Datin Seri Sunita Rajakumar, who's the chairperson and director in absentia, for spearheading this 3-part webinar series on achieving net zero. We aspire for this collaboration with CGM to establish a sense of urgency on this issue and to act as a forum for the exchange of knowledge. And so, as mentioned, really looking forward to hearing from our experts today and hearing all of the questions that all of the participants have as well. Achieving net zero emissions is considered essential to limit global warming and its associated impacts, as outlined in the Paris Agreement. Many countries, businesses, and organizations have set net zero targets as part of their efforts to combat climate change. To achieve the net zero target, necessary breakthroughs will be needed in many areas. This, of course, includes developing alternative energy sources, improving energy efficiency, reducing the use of fossil fuels, and promoting carbon pricing. That said, the transition to a low carbon economy will require the development of innovative technologies and processes supported by clean energy. And then, of course, from a climate perspective, the most crucial factor is that everyone is working together to reduce these carbon emissions at every level. In doing so, more emissions can be prevented from entering the atmosphere, and the future can be safeguarded against the dire consequences. Here at the U.S. Embassy, we are committed to support knowledge sharing on this topic of strategic importance to the United States. A huge thanks also to the U.S. Speaker Program at ECA for offering subject matter experts and this opportunity to engage with local audiences, expand networks, and exchange ideas with professionals from across the globe. This morning, we're happy to have two esteemed American speakers, Sean Armstrong, who is the co-founder and managing principal of Redwood Energy, which is a design firm that works on all-electric solar offset designs. Mr. Armstrong helped develop the Title 24 California Energy Codes and has received Sustainable Design Awards from the UN and the U.S. Department of Energy. I'd also like to welcome Ms. Chandra Farley, who serves as the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Atlanta and leads the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience. In this role, Ms. Farley sets direction for the city's sustainability and climate resilience goals and develops the interdepartmental and community-wide engagement necessary to advance the city's climate action goals. I'd also just like to give a huge shout out and thanks to our local panelists and moderator, Mitch Gelber, who's the CEO of Malaysia Green Building Council, and Tang, who's the director of GreenPagesMalaysia, and most of all of the participants joining today. I'm looking forward to a great session. I hope you enjoy as well. All right, I guess back to you, Shern, or I'm handing it over straight to Sean Armstrong. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Yeah, over to you, Sean, to give the opening, the keynote remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate this as getting to have an intergovernmental, international conversation. So I'm going to talk about electrifying homes. So the quick background on me, I grew up on a farm in the rural Midwest of the United States in Wisconsin. I was a high school science teacher. I like questions. When you're a high school science teacher, you're supposed to solicit questions and people's curiosity. So any questions you have, I love those. I then spent 6 years working with an affordable housing company. And since 2011, that's actually been my consultancy. Primarily, I've been helping affordable housing developers, subsidized housing developers, lower their construction costs, which we found is all electric, lowered construction costs, and then lower the operating costs, the overtime costs, by putting solar arrays onto all electric developments. So you might say, why would Malaysia, though, electrify? Because it's true, your grid, Malaysia's grid, is about 19% clean energy. America's grid is around 40% clean energy. But regardless of 19% or 40%, it is still a net benefit from the greenhouse gas perspective to electrify. Now, to show you one of the reasons why is because of methane leaks. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. Natural gas is mostly methane. It's a little bit of water vapor, a couple other chemicals in there, but 80 to 90% methane. And what we've come to understand through studying methane is that it is more powerful than carbon dioxide. When you burn methane, you create CO2, carbon dioxide. That's the main constituent of greenhouse gases. But because methane is so powerful, and specifically because methane is only in the air for 10 to 20 years before it essentially disappears, most of its impact is in its first 10 years, actually. So if you look on the right-hand side, we used to think that methane was the dark green line in the middle, like it's just a little band there. That was the amount of greenhouse gas pollution that methane represented. But if you look at it, the next line over is if you look at its impact over its actual lifespan in the next 20 years, you go, oh, no, actually it has a much more significant impact in the near term than CO2. And if you study its concentrations in the atmosphere, as opposed to what people self-report, we discovered that actually about 40% of climate change in the world is from leaked methane, not the burning of it. Or a way to think of it, if you leak 3% of the natural gas delivered to your house, the methane, if 3% of it's leaked, and it looks like it's more like 3 to 10% is leaked, but if 3% is leaked, that is equal to burning the other 97% in terms of climate change. 3% leaked equals 97% burnt. So you can see how having natural gas delivered to your house has twice as much impact as you might think because of the leakage associated with it. Here is a global map of leaks. And this is supposed to raise attention to the fact that, getting rid of gas in buildings is not just about the burning of it. It's actually about the whole system of the leaks that serves your house. Malaysia's electricity is also has a strong roadmap for decarbonizing, for becoming renewable. 31% in just a couple of years, 40% by 2035, 70% by 2050. I promise you that this is the slow version. This isn't actually how the world is behaving. So down here on the lower right-hand side, this is kind of a funny image because the global the Energy Information Agency of our planet, every year or two, they come out with a line that they've predicted how solar would grow. And you can see all these colored lines were their prediction over time. And every couple of years, they had to put out a new line. And it was always like, well, but it's kind of flattened out now. And you can see that it's literally off the chart now in 2023. There's no prediction that the International Energy Agency has made that has been correct. What we're actually seeing is radical exponential growth of solar and wind globally. And I predict that would be true for Malaysia, since it seems to be true for the whole planet right now. Things are going much faster than any predictions, or actually faster than most people's plans. Now, if you'd like to have solar on your roof as opposed to on the grid, Malaysia's awesome. You have a net energy metering scheme, a rate schedule. You can install up to 4 kilowatts, which is usually more than enough for 100% offset of someone's house. An all-electric house, 4 kilowatts is all you need, and you're 100% offset. If you want to also drive 2 or 3 electric cars plus an electric swimming pool, then 10 kilowatts might be what you're looking for. That's just noting at the bottom, it's very popular. They've already got 75% of the quota, the first tranche of what was expected, filled up. Now, the reason why is because it pays back very well. You can see here that this specific example, Peter Wong installed the panels. He says, I couldn't bear the higher electricity bills. I decided to invest in 10 solar panels with a capacity of 4.7 kilowatts, which I showed before. 4 kilowatts is the limit. So essentially puts in 4 kilowatts, and he found that eliminated his utility bills, and that's a 6-year payback compared to like it cost 20,000 ringgit. It has the benefit of 3360 per year. So that's 6 years of payback. If people are concerned about having an all-electric home not provide power during a power outage, there are affordable batteries that are out there now. Goal Zero has a Malaysia office, as does Jackery. And these batteries, you can also get a standalone solar array. You can just get just a panel or two to feed the battery, and you can be off-grid kind of anytime. You could take it out to the beach, or if there's a power outage in your home, you can continue to cook on it, use an induction stove with it, for instance, keep the lights on, etc. So your appliances, we're going to dig a little bit into the appliances of your house. So first, I want to say that Malaysia could be all electric, just the way 3/4 of the buildings in Hawaii right now, one of the states of the United States, 3/4 of them are all electric right now. There's no difference significantly in the climate between Malaysia and Hawaii. I was looking that up. We have similar moderate climates. And the reason why it was done in Hawaii is because it's relatively expensive to get gas to these islands. And it's relatively cheap to send around electricity. And now they're finding Hawaii has such great wind resources and a great solar window that they're able to rapidly lower the price of electricity because they're not using so much imported fossil fuels. They're using locally generated wind and solar, which is much cheaper. Now, I wanted to start with cooking. I have a habit of going online and finding newspaper articles of people's homes that have blown up because of gas. So my brother, he owns a condo in New York City. He owned previously, a few years ago, a condo. He sold it because of COVID, and he moved out of New York City. And 1 month later, upstairs, someone's gas stove exploded. There was a leak in the apartment, the condo. Someone turned on their gas stove, and it caused a massive explosion in the apartment. The person was taken to a hospital in a coma, and the whole building had the fire sprinklers turned on, and it ruined everyone's floors and the drywall. So the whole building got hugely water damaged. And people also then had the gas was turned off to the whole building in the wintertime. So they were cold, and they had their houses were destroyed, and it was all because of one gas stove. And that happens a lot in apartment complexes. Gas stoves will cause really large problems. Like I said, I look at newspaper articles all over the world. Gas stoves are a danger. They also cause asthma. You can't see gas smoke, but that is gas smoke. In the same way that when you turn on a car, after it's been going for a little while, you can't see the smoke, but you know there's smoke. Like if you stick your face into the exhaust of a car, it's bad for you. It's also the same bad for you off of a gas stove. Actually, a little worse because cars usually have a catalytic converter to clean up the smoke, and gas stoves don't, which is why we've seen for almost 30 years of research on this, we can say that gas stoves cause asthma. About 1 in 12 people who have asthma got it just because of their stove. Or differently put, if you have a gas stove, it makes you about 40% more likely to get asthma. It may not only be because of the stove, but the gas stove pushes it over the edge. So the fires, the fact that they really damage your lungs, they're bad for you, they cause asthma. They also cause heart attack symptoms. And then how hot gas stoves can make kitchens, where induction stoves, I'm going to show you a picture in a sec. You might already know them, but induction stoves, they produce 2/3 less heat. Or differently put, gas stoves produce 3 times as much heat in your kitchen because they're not efficient. The gas flame burns, but only about 25–30% of the heat gets into the food. Whereas an induction stove, it's like 75–90% of the heat gets into the food. So you don't have to put as much heat into the kitchen to heat the food. And that makes a much cooler kitchen, more comfortable, when it's 90 degrees outside. It's no fun to cook in your kitchen. I want to speak to the fact that there are electric options for all kinds of cooking. So there's lots of woks out there. Over in China, there's a huge industry supplying woks, big woks, 24-inch woks, 48-inch woks, 60-inch woks. I mean, things almost as big as my arms can be wide. Then they make them in induction for all the reasons I was just showing. They're safer, they're not as hot, they're more efficient. But these are just like small house versions of them. You can also get them built into your countertop. Similarly, electric grills, they work great. They can grill vegetables and meats and all the rest of it. You can put in charcoal, and there are smokers that are electric if you want the flavor of smoke. But if you're trying to cook food and have sort of like the drippings of it make some smoke, that happens with an electric grill. You get sort of like that normal smokiness from food cooking, and also, no char marks and such in the fun of cooking outside. So this is what sort of high-end, nice induction countertop, like cooktops look like in Malaysia. One's from the appliance store. And you can see this one has 3 cooking zones. This one has 2 cooking zones. There are ones out there that have 4 cooking zones and ones with 1 cooking zone. I've even seen ones with 6 cooking zones if you want to spend a lot of money. but just for the general beloved homeowner, these are the options a lot of people are choosing. One that just mentioned, yeah, like you can just get ones that plug in into any outlet. If you're trying to stop using your gas stove now, I give these away as holiday gifts to people, birthday gifts, because they're so inexpensive. I can afford, just as a friend, to give someone a 1 or a 2 burner induction range, and then I know that it's safer for their kids. They don't have essentially the equivalent of a cigarette smoker in the house. But I didn't mention that. That's the same health impacts. If there's someone who smokes in your house a pack or 2 a day, that is as bad for the family as cooking with a gas stove in the house, because the smoke from the gas stove gets throughout the entire house. So I always feel good about giving it as a gift. Now, I'm going to move into water heaters. They make water heaters now where they put a small air conditioner on top of it or on the side of it. And these little air conditioners, they're smaller than even a window air conditioner. They're more like leaving a refrigerator door open for a few hours. They're a small amount of cooling, but they have some cooling, which is nice. And they also dry the air out a little bit of dehumidification. So what they do is the air conditioner that sits on top of the tank of water, as it cools the air, it's heating up a liquid called refrigerant. It's actually kind of an oil. It heats up the oil as it's chilling the air. So the heat comes out of the air, and the oil is wrapped around the outside of the tank, underneath insulation though, and it heats up the tank of water. So you're using a little air conditioner. And what's nice about this is that it means that about 2/3 to 3/4 of all the electricity, of all the heat that's in the tank, 2/3 to 3/4 of it is from the air. So it's a kind of solar heat collector almost. It collects the heat out of the air, which is heated by the sun, collects the heat out of the air, and it heats up the water with that heat. So it's a very efficient solar thermal collector that works even when it's dark. And just plug it into the wall and it can collect heat out of the air. And they come in all different sizes. And this brand here is a Malaysian brand, Pikul, not sure. But since 1968, it's an old company. Ream, I'm more familiar with them. They're manufactured just outside of Atlanta, and Chandra, the speaker after me, she's speaking from Atlanta. So I think the global headquarters of Ream is near Atlanta, Georgia. And here's an example of the heat pump water heater they sell in Malaysia. And what I like about this, by the way, is that it's quiet. Not every heat pump water heater, which is what they're called. They're an air conditioner, but they call it a heat pump when it's in heating mode. It's chilling air still, but it's heating water, so they call it a heat pump. Whatever. This air conditioner / heat pump, it has a computer in it. The computer is what makes it have a whisper quiet function, because that window air conditioners can be loud, but they can be quiet. And they've invested in a computer to make it extra quiet. That's the main way, that, along with some foam, but a computer can run them much lower and at lower speeds, making less noise. And that's nice. The computer controls that make it variable. Even the illustration here, you can see how the line goes big up, and then it basically saying you can run this big or small. It can have variable amounts of heat that it produces, and that just allows it to run quieter. So this is a very excellent heat pump water heater in Malaysia. And this is the smallest one we found in Malaysia. I love this one. It's adorable. If you're familiar, in the United States, I think of gallons. And this is a 15-gallon water heater. You are, of course, thinking over in liters, and so a 60-liter water heater. This is on its side. They're very common, I've seen in Japan, but this one's a Malaysian product. And it has a little heat pump water heater on the side of it, where you can see the vent is over there. So you might put it, for instance, in a bathroom. And then you have water for the shower. You can plumb it over into the kitchen, but it's just a place that'll make the bathroom kind of, less humid. Like, it'll help dry the bathroom out after a shower if you put this little heat pump water heater in the bathroom. So it's just one of the options. I'm not saying it's the best one. I'm saying, look, Here's tanks of many different sizes. Here's another manufacturer of tanks of different sizes. And here's a little tiny tank. So it uses 1/3 or 1/4 as much electricity as if you were just using an electric resistance element, like a toaster coil, like when it turns red. They make water heaters that just, essentially you have a red metal, hot metal element inside of it. That electric resistance type of water heater uses 3 or 4 times as much electricity as this heat pump version. So it's a way of lowering bills and lowering the stress on the electrical grid and just generally being more frugal. Now, your home, of course, is connected to the rest of the world by transportation. And so I was going to show a few examples of personal transportation. This is not a mass transit little talk that I was intending to give. So I'm just personal vehicles in Malaysia. So first is the question, is it less expensive? Is it cheaper to drive an electric vehicle in Malaysia? And yes, they certainly are. Because they use about 1/4, even 1/5 as much fuel. Overall, it is a lower cost driving experience in Malaysia and actually in the whole world. I don't know if there's any place right now where it is less expensive to drive a gas car than an electric car. Purchasing the cars, gas cars are still a little bit less expensive for their first purchase price, but that difference is sometime within the next year or two. We're expecting battery cars to be the same price, and then operating them, like I said, in California, where we have relatively high taxes on gas, it's about 1/5 as expensive, 20% as expensive to drive an electric vehicle. So it's really affordable for people with less money. And we're seeing that, EV sales in Malaysia are jumping. They're going up fast. Mercedes says that their EV sales are outpacing the global average, and they intend to sell exclusively electric vehicles in Malaysia by 2030. But what we're seeing is that some manufacturers have already started announcing their end dates as 2025. In Norway, particularly now, where 80% of vehicle sales are electric, that's where we're starting to see like Hyundai, for instance, which is an electric vehicle manufacturer also. They've said they're not selling any more electric vehicles in Norway in 2025, but realistically, they're not selling any today. Almost nobody is buying gas cars anymore in Norway. And it's not as true in California. We're at about 30% of sales, but over in China, we're getting closer to 45 to 50% of sales are electric vehicles this year. So the world is changing pretty quickly around the sale of electric vehicles. It's on like that solar line I showed earlier. That's what the EV sales line is looking like. It is going up straight up. Nissan Leaf. Now, I'm going to show you here in a moment that, there's a charger problem to a degree in Malaysia, the limited number of places where there's public chargers. However, charging at home, if you have a long distance car, is very reasonable. I charge at home. I never use public chargers except if I'm on a long road trip. And this has a range of 311 kilometers. So you can take a long road trip with this and come home, even being gone for days, etc., and then charge up at home if that was what you wanted to do. And of course, your daily errands, getting around. You're definitely not going 300 kilometers in a day. You're just doing your errands. So, pardon me here. I was mentioning that, why aren't electric vehicles more popular in Malaysia? And the fact that there isn't a strong public charging network on the eastern side of the peninsula or over, near Brunei, you can see on the map here, this is what Malaysia has today. However, that can change fast. So, because the demand is going up so quickly, and as I was showing, having a large storage battery means that you don't have to think as much about public charging. Like I said, it's been my experience. I thought that public charging was going to be a bigger deal in my life, but I almost never go to a public charger. And I slow charge at home. I'm not even doing a fast charger, just while I'm sleeping at night. My car fills up while I'm sleeping at night. I wake up in the morning, it's full. That works pretty easily. Now, I want to expand here for a moment. There are some really innovative strategies of using electric vehicles as the batteries for homes and for the grid. It started in Japan at scale after the tsunami in 2011 because the nuclear power plants of Japan were all shut down overnight after the tsunami. That was 1/3 of the electricity in Japan. Nissan at the time had their Nissan electric Leaf car, and people had been using sort of like private, not official technologies to pull electricity out of the car if they were going to run their house off grid. That had been happening since like the 1990s. But Nissan did it officially. Nissan came out with kind of a suitcase-sized inverter box to take the DC electricity that's in a battery of the car and turn it into AC electricity. So people in Japan were running their houses in the evening when there's very little extra electricity. It's mostly coal at the time, and coal power plants can't be turned up and turned down. They just kind of flatline. So when people came home in the evening for their peak energy use, they were using their cars instead. That was in 2011. It's been piloted a bunch of places around the world, but where it's really being deployed at scale is in the Netherlands. And in the western part of Eurasia, the Netherlands are the leaders, the Netherlanders are the leaders in electrifying buildings and vehicles. And this here is where they have now 1,000 electric chargers in the city, public chargers, that can take electricity from the car and put it into the grid. They've been studying this. What they found is that if they get to 15,000 for their city of about 175,000 people, so if they have about 15,000 chargers in use, that will give them a 100% clean grid where they can store the extra sunshine of the day, and they can store the extra wind at night, and they can use those two resources through the vehicle battery to fill in the gaps in between, because when the sun goes down, it usually takes a couple hours for the wind to come up, offshore wind. But they're not perfectly matched. They're close. So having that gap of a little bit of battery energy in between those couple hours, that's a really important part of successfully making a 100% renewable grid. So Utrecht, as a government, a city agency, just like Atlanta that Chandra is going to speak from, they have, as a city, put out 1,000 of the 15,000 chargers so they can have quickly a 100% renewable grid. You might wonder, like, how do people feel about that? Well, we are designing an apartment complex right now with this in mind. And what we're finding is that if we put in the right amount of solar, we can have free charging for the cars only during daylight hours, but we have enough extra solar that they can get free charging for about all the days of the year, except maybe 3 weeks. For those 3 weeks, that's when, and it's scattered over the winter, that's when we need them to charge us into the apartment complex's central battery. And so it looks like for $1,800 a year of free driving from the electricity, they can get, and if they'll give us about $50 of electricity in the wintertime and get $1,800 of free electricity. So that is a deal that there's been a lot of surveys and the real world that we're saying that people are willing to do that. So if they get a really significant benefit, they're willing to give you the electricity when you need it in the wintertime. And that's allowing us to do a completely off-grid apartment complex of 130 apartments in a city in Petaluma, in the North Bay of California, the Bay Area. So this is somewhat futuristic for California, for everywhere in the world except parts of Japan, the Netherlands, but it's not far off because most of the vehicle manufacturers in the world have announced that between 2025 and 2026, all of their electric vehicle models will be able to do bi-directional charging. So that's only 2 years to 3 years away. That's the right amount of time for us to think about what that means, because it's coming soon. And here's an example in Singapore, where they're using a Nissan Leaf here as a part of this microgrid. They have batteries, they have a large solar array. Unfortunately, they have a generator because ideally we're not using any fossil fuels, but hopefully it never gets turned on. Because look, there's all these other diverse sources of energy. But the point of this is just to show and the vehicle is a part of it. So there's lots of cute scooters that are electric in Malaysia. I just narrowed down my slides to one. I think it's interesting because they have removable batteries. I haven't seen that in scooters in the United States, but it's actually a common strategy, it looks like in Malaysia, to be able to take out a battery and just instantly throw in another one and it's charged because these batteries are relatively small and you're only going maybe 110 kilometers. So max speed, 80 kilometers an hour, you can go zippity fast. Here's bicycles. I just like that. I mean, in the United States, there's far more electric bicycles that have been sold than there have been electric vehicles, like cars and trucks and such. And people don't really recognize that. But really, the electric vehicle market has first been scooters and bicycles. That is the majority of the sales out there by vehicle, not by battery amount, but by vehicle, because it's just not that expensive to make a really fast, awesome bicycle. I'm almost at the conclusion of my slides, just so you know. I want to show you boats. Obviously, there's a lot of water around Malaysia. And there's a number of electric boat manufacturers of the motors in the back with the batteries. And this is one of the examples that we found. The Torpedo. Now, small battery, 11 kilograms, but pretty powerful at 50 kW. If you're on a highway going 50 kW of that amount of power, you're going like 60 miles an hour. So in a truck, like a heavy truck. So this 50 kW motor, that means that can go through water, probably like 40 to 50 miles an hour at full blast. So yeah, you can go fast. It's a plenty fast boat. And here's just a small example of this though. Where it's really changing people's lives because it's an affordable electric option because fuel is expensive. Now, this is a seaweed farming community in Zanzibar, and this project led by ePropulsion, they free people from the punishing costs of purchasing boat fuel and all the pollution in the water, of course, as well. So this is an example of how you can, just like with cars, how it can lower the cost of transportation by 80%. It's the same thing as with boats. That fuel is expensive and it's dirty. And these are simple and easy to use engines that make almost no noise either, just from a purely pleasurable perspective. So I think that is my last slide there. And I just wanted to note that, Alan, you commented that your BYD Dolphin has a real world range over 400 kilometers. We only charge at home. It has vehicle to load, excellent. And it can charge at 80 kW and AC charge at 7 kW, fast charge. So it can do both, fast and slow. Cost was 125,000 RM, ringgit. So yeah, you have almost the perfect solution. The BYD has announced also that all of their electric vehicles will be bi-directional by 2025. As you know, that's a big manufacturer in China and in the world of electric vehicles. So thank you all for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them over in the chat with anybody. But with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Chandra Farley of Atlanta, Georgia.
Chandra, you're muted, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Always learning a lot from you and this presentation. So I'm looking forward to following up the technical learnings with how we are able to move technologies and be a source of innovation in moving these technologies forward at the city of Atlanta and as a local government. So Again, my name is Chandra Farley, and I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Atlanta. And our office, the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, is a mayor's office. We have multiple mayor's offices within our city government, as well as operating departments. So when we talk about moving Atlanta forward, which is our mayor's agenda, and we are talking about environmental sustainability, climate resilience, the circular economy, local food systems, building decarbonization, fleet electrification, all rooted in environmental justice, is really the charge for our office. And this is my team. We are small but mighty, and we work together really as the weaver of sustainability across the multiple mayor's offices and across the multiple operating departments. So we're talking about mayor's offices. We are charged with incorporating and driving the mayor's agenda forward, and we do that in partnership with our operating department. So as a mayor's office, when we are talking about building decarbonization or a municipal building decarbonization strategy or fleet electrification or installing EV charging infrastructure, I don't have any buildings, right? But our fire and rescue department has buildings. Our Department of Parks and Recreation has buildings. Our Department of Watershed Management has buildings. So we really have to build deep relationships and work in partnership with those departments, as it takes all of us to move Atlanta forward sustainably, and with an eye towards being a more climate resilient city and a city that is a leader and rooted in advancing sustainability and climate resilient initiatives equitably and with a lens of environmental justice. So sustainability is in Atlanta's DNA. We have long been known as a leader in sustainability, particularly in the South. We were one of the first cities in the South to have a sustainable building ordinance. We were one of the first cities, definitely in the South, and as well as in the nation, to have a commercial benchmarking ordinance. So we've long been a leader in sustainability. And what you see here is really an evolution of our planning, from our very first climate action plan in 2015, through today, where we now have a decarbonization roadmap that we will be and are working on more intently to incorporate and make sure that climate resilience is seen as a key component of local government, as an operational function for the city, the local government, but also citywide, for the whole city of Atlanta. And when we talk about good paying jobs in the new green energy, clean energy economy, building and preserving affordable housing, creating a clean transportation network, being engaged with community, and again, always pushing the envelope to position Atlanta as a leader in the South, in the nation, and globally. Those have been themes and will continue to be themes as we move forward with continuing to implement many of the strategies across these plans, but really start to push the envelope with some of the strategies through our decarbonization roadmap. So we have a 100% clean energy plan right now. We talk about our plan as achieving 100% clean energy for 100% of Atlantans by 2035. This plan was developed over 2-ish years or so. Developing a clean energy plan was a strategy identified in the Resilient Atlanta strategy that came before it. So that just gives you an idea of how we are continuing to move forward on strategies as they are developed. And when our city council adopted this resolution to transition the city to 100% clean energy, they also adopted interim goals, which is really important. So right now we're tracking towards this 30% of that 100% by 2025. And what you see here is an example of how we're doing. We've been doing a lot of work within the city, and particularly within my office and the team, to really update our metrics, understand where we are. You can't manage what you can't measure. So we have been intently focused on where are we? What was the baseline? What do we need to do now? Particularly as we begin to embark on a comprehensive climate resilient strategy for the city, which we will begin working on in 2024. Sean was talking about sort of the electricity regulatory framework, was how I'll refer to it. And so City of Atlanta, we do not generate, our own, we get all of our electricity from Georgia Power, the utility. So whatever their energy mix is what our energy mix is. So adopting that 100% clean energy goal was very ambitious. We had a number of other cities across the state, after we adopted our goal, to adopt their own 100% clean energy commitments, and modeled those commitments off of our plan. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'll talk about some of the things that we are doing to drive that goal forward. One of them is our decarb roadmap. And this is our roadmap that was developed as part of the American Cities Climate Challenge, which was a 3-year engagement with Bloomberg that ended a couple of years ago. And this was one of the final products of that partnership. We have the potential to reduce carbon emissions from buildings by about 50%. And these are the top strategies here. A green bank, which is a mechanism that we are looking at in Georgia, that is growing. There are more coming across the United States of America, and these are banks that are specifically focused on funding and financing projects related to sustainability and climate resilience. You've all heard of the Inflation Reduction Act, passed by our Congress and President Joe Biden. And that is really working to push billions of dollars. This is a historic, never been seen before level of investment in the United States specifically for climate action. And so a lot of those dollars are flowing to community-based organizations, to states, but also to local governments. So we are going to be looking at those dollars to help us achieve the proposed strategies and policies that are listed in this decarbonization roadmap, but also to make sure we are setting up a funding or financing mechanism to help us build up funding and opportunities that will push us further into the long term, long after a lot of these grant opportunities have passed. So we are really excited about our Solar Atlanta program. Our Solar Atlanta program is the largest municipal solar program in the state. So this is how we have been able to install solar on 23 of our facilities, as I talked about in the introduction. This is why partnerships are so key internally with our mayor's offices and departments, but across the city. Public-private partnerships are critical for us as a local government to be able to achieve our sustainability and climate resilience goals. We have just recently, in the past couple of weeks, passed legislation to double the size of our Solar Atlanta program. And we've added our airport, which we are really excited about, to now be a part of that program. So we'll see going from 23 to 25 buildings and doubling that number, to 45, 50 buildings over the next 3 to 5 years. As we look at our next phase of Solar Atlanta, we'll also be looking at storage opportunities. This is particularly important when we talk about the increasing impacts of climate change and understanding, particularly in a city like Atlanta, a city in the South, where the impacts of climate change fall hardest on our marginalized communities that may be classified as Black communities, communities classified as low income, all of those things that could be classifying a community as disadvantaged or more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. We look at the places where we have solar on our recreation centers. This is a picture of one of our larger recreation centers. And so as we look at putting solar on other recreation centers, we'll be focused on those recreation centers, fire stations, watershed management facilities that are located in or close to our more marginalized communities, to one, make sure that we are able to support cleaner air in those areas, more job opportunities, and also in times of natural or man-made disaster, the city will open warming centers in the winter or cooling centers in the summer. And these are places where our unhoused population, or maybe those that have lost power, or in a lot of cases where people are sometimes concerned about not having enough money to run the systems that either heat or cool their homes because of the rising utility costs. So by pairing storage with the solar on some of our recreation facilities in times of that natural or man-made disaster, community members can come to these resilience hubs, as we refer to them. They could keep their medicines cool, they could keep their food cool, they could charge their phones, and we would be able to do this by utilizing battery storage if in the cases where the grid is down. Buildings are our largest source of emissions in the city of Atlanta. Transportation is our second largest source of emissions. And so that is where we focus, again, because we don't control our utility. Our utility is regulated by 5 members of a public service commission, and they make all the decisions about where our energy comes from, how much it's going to cost, and how much residents and cities pay for it. So that's very, very important. And Atlanta has long been a leader in sustainable buildings. This was the Better Buildings Challenge, where Atlanta finished in the top 5 of cities across the nation because of the number of buildings and the amount of over 100 million square feet of commercial buildings and municipal buildings and nonprofits. It was a full citywide effort. We also, after the Better Buildings Challenge, that led us into an opportunity to create the benchmarking ordinance that I mentioned earlier. And so commercial buildings over a certain amount of square feet, of 25,000 square feet or more, are required to report their energy and water usage to the city. This is our Atlanta energy map. And this is where we're able to track commercial buildings, whether they're in compliance, whether they're reporting, and they're able to use a free platform through Energy Star Portfolio Manager to report that usage. And so I talked a bit about energy burden. City Atlanta has one of the highest energy burdens in the nation. And energy burden is when a household is putting forward 6% or more of their household income towards energy cost. In a lot of areas of Atlanta, that percentage is up and above 10%, which is considered energy poverty. This is driven by a lot of factors: older energy inefficient housing stock, the rising cost of utilities, lower median household incomes, and lack of access to and participation and knowledge around energy efficiency programs. One of the ways we are trying to tackle that challenge as a city is our Weatherize ATL program. It's been in development for a number of years. We were finally able to receive some federal funding and have been launching that program. And so this program is specifically focused on reducing energy burden on our most energy burdened households in the city of Atlanta. Our mayor has a goal to build or preserve 20,000 units of affordable housing over the next 8 years. Affordable housing is a huge challenge in the city of Atlanta and across the nation. And we know that reducing energy burden has not just only to reduce people's energy bills, but creates healthier home environments, more stable home environments, more efficient home environments. And once they're more energy efficient, they may be ready for solar. So in addition to launching this Weatherize program, we are also in partnership and have launched a solar leasing program where our goal is to support an opportunity to get more solar on households across the city of Atlanta. This is another program that we are using that we hope will provide more funding for our projects across the city. Atlanta is known as the city in the forest. We have been losing some of that tree canopy, but have a lot of commitment from our mayor, our city council, and advocacy groups to continue preserving our tree canopy. One of the innovative ways that we are looking at doing that in partnership, we have a land acquisition partner who helps the city acquire land to preserve it for green space. One of those most recent projects was called at the Lake Charlotte Nature Preserve. And it was proposed to us that we could pilot a forest preservation project that will not only reduce carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but the co-benefits of this are that we will be able to sell these credits on the market and generate dollars that will come back to the city into a sustainable project fund, revolving fund that will help us have funding to maintain this preserve. So we'll actually be sharing that revenue with our Department of Parks and Recreation to support their ability to maintain this urban forest. We are also very focused on the sustainable development goals. We have been and will continue to align the sustainable development goals with all of our plans, and particularly the climate action plan, updated climate action plan that we will begin to focus a community-wide engagement on in 2024. And most important to that, all of the work that we do, all of those plans and the progression of plans that I showed at the beginning of our presentation has all been done with extensive community input. I come from community and an advocacy background and have been in partnership with the city for many years as a partner on the community-based organization side, and now in this role as Chief Sustainability Officer. I'm glad to have the support of our mayor, who was supportive of relaunching our Clean Energy Advisory Board. So this is a board of 25 residents representing academia, nonprofits, technical assistance organizations. And we reserve 6 seats on that board, specifically for residents from the most energy burdened communities of the city of Atlanta. So as we are building plans, we have the voices of the people that we know these plans can benefit and who are most impacted, because what we know, the people closest to the problem are the people with the best solutions. So that's a 25-member board. And then we're able to bring in more community through these working groups. These are the 4 working groups that the board agreed to focus on for this year. And we are prepared. They've been working on strategy decks and coming up with focus areas based on these topics. And they will be presenting those at our final meeting of the year next week. And so we're really excited to see what they've come up with. And we also went through a sustainability innovation lab anchored by our Clean Energy Advisory Board, key members from some of our city departments and city agencies, all to come together to build our shared vision for what will be the basis of our comprehensive climate resilience strategy that we will begin updating in 2024. And this is just another example when we are talking about the impacts of climate change, interdepartmental coordination, technical assistance partnership. This is a new smart surfaces partnership that we are a part of thanks to the National League of Cities and the Smart Services Coalition. Because as we are a city in the forest, we are also one of the largest metropolitan areas in the nation, and we have a lot of impervious surfaces, a lot of hard surfaces, and we really are focusing on how we can mitigate the urban heat island effect. So through this Smart Surfaces program, we'll be looking at getting solar on more rooftops. We'll be looking at cool roof legislation, cool roof strategies. So we've got more reflective surfaces on our rooftops. And informing this work is also work that some members of our city council worked with one of our local universities and is now informing my office and our senior arborist in our Department of Parks and Recreation on a block by block heat and flood vulnerability assessment. So now we know the specific neighborhoods across the city that are hotter than others, and no surprise that overlaps with those that are most energy burdened, or are more vulnerable to other impacts of climate change. So that is all of these programs working together are really how we will, again, just looping back to our focus on electrification, is how we'll be able to move these strategies forward. And one thing I'll mention about this, we're very excited to be a host city for the FIFA World Cup in 2026. We just on Friday submitted a very comprehensive environmental plan for that, and we'll be working over that over the next 2.5 years as we prepare to welcome the World Cup. And again, it's just really important to have the leadership of our mayor and the support of our city council as we push forward on that 100% clean energy, 100% clean energy goal. And I will look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
That's a very impressive presentation, Chandra. Thank you very much, and congratulations for hosting the FIFA. So now let us welcome Sean and Chandra to join our local panelists, CK Tang, who is the director of GreenPagesMalaysia, and moderator Mitch Gelber, CEO of Malaysia Green Building Council, for a panel discussion. Over to you, Mitch.
Thank you, Sharon. It's great to have everyone here this morning, and thank you, Sean and Chandra, for your sharing about experiences from the States and around the world. So I'm going to add myself and CK to the discussion now. And we want to start with localizing the discussion to a Malaysia context, where because we live in a tropical environment, our homes are already predominantly electrified. We don't use fossil fuels in Malaysia to satisfy heating or cooling demand in our homes. So in a Malaysian context, where our homes are already predominantly electrified, how does this conversation about electrification frame itself? I think maybe I'll direct this question first to Sean and to CK.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. So I wanted to return to this slide to emphasize how the fact that you have very little natural gas connected to your buildings is all the more reason to get rid of it, because it is the connections that cause the leaks. About half the leaks that you'll see total in the system are in the streets and then to your house and then at each appliance connection, and then the appliance itself leaks gas. So you get about a 1.5% of at least 3%. The other 1.5% at minimum is then the rest of the leaks upstream, which we're seeing from atmospheric studies are really significant. So the goal then is if you don't have much connected, just get rid of it, because you're having a disproportionate impact on the leaks by no longer using the infrastructure. It's actually like you're perfect. If you have lots of gas connected, it's kind of hard. If you only have a little bit of gas connected, rip off the Band-Aid and get the job done, because it'll have a disproportionate positive impact if you do.
CK, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's moving forward to electrification is the way to go forward. But what we have in Malaysia here is that our gas are delivered in these small 12 kg tanks, and it's heavily subsidized because the B40s are normally the one using these gas tanks, and it's actually quite a strong reluctance to reduce the subsidy on these gases. So people tend to, in Malaysia, it's so much cheaper to use this gas to cook than to use electricity. So there is this challenge that we need to overcome. How do we provide subsidy to the B40s while removing this gas tank from them? So it's a challenge that we need to overcome.
Yeah, I think.
Can I just add real
sorry,
quickly?
Sean. Yeah.
I want to make a distinction, which is that tank gas, which is propane, is actually not a bad chemical when it leaks. And cooking is very little energy that you're using, and it's just fine, in my opinion, to continue cooking on propane gas. I'm sorry, it's dark here. The sun is setting. See, the sun is setting. See if I can fix that. But anyway, so the point is that you could continue with gas cooking on tanks. No big deal. It is the natural gas that's delivered into the cities. We're not talking about people's homes, but more about people's apartments and also some of the subdivisions and larger developments.
Yeah.
Natural gas.
So I'll jump in, Sean. In Malaysia, because I think we don't have heating needs, we don't have municipal gas lines in the same way that cities in the U.S. do at that scale. And maybe just as a quick a note of clarification, mentioned propane. CK, is propane the same as liquefied petroleum, and does that have a similar environmental impact?
I think we're using LPG here. Okay, I'm not sure about the chemical content when it burns.
Because I thought that Sean, that was one of the most illustrative examples you showed of cooking with a gas hub, having an equivalence of a pack or two a day really changes the way we think about how we inject fossil fuels directly into our homes and how intimate that relationship with fossil fuels is, how destructive it can be for our health. I think let's move on to the next question, which deals specifically with transportation. And I think Sean raised some really good slides about the transition to electrified modes of transport, and also about how this transition is really proceeding exponentially. Solutions that we couldn't have envisioned maybe 5-10 years ago are all of a sudden becoming commonplace. So, maybe Chandra, I'll direct this to you. What's your experience been like in Atlanta in terms of the uptake of electric vehicles and transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. So City of Atlanta had a fuel conversion plan for our city fleets, and we now boast one of the largest electric fleets in the Southeast. And we also were the first in our region to pass an EV readiness ordinance, which required all new single family homes to be EV ready. And in addition, 20% of all new commercial and new multifamily residential parking to be EV ready. We also published an EV readiness workbook, which helps with compliance and provides tools to go beyond the ordinance. Our mayor also bought an electric vehicle, a Rivian, and was one of the first to have a Rivian or electric vehicle as a part. It's his official executive protection vehicle, so it's outfitted with all of the things that go with executive protection. So we're really excited about that, to continue to model how important the transition is. So we are doing a lot of work right now to update those ordinances and focusing on how we get more charging infrastructure out. You know, I think we're moving down the road on fleet electrification with the vehicles, but we've got to keep up with the charging infrastructure. And so to serve our city fleet, but also the public, we actually have created a program that we submitted for funding where we are trying to get charging at our public facilities, again, focusing on those that already have solar on them. So we're kind of creating these little energy resilient communities around our public infrastructure that started with solar. Now we're adding EV charging. So just trying to model and continuing to push the envelope and prioritizing the importance of expanding that charging infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Chandra. It's interesting to note that the similarities between Atlanta and Kuala Lumpur. I mean, we share similar climates, but also you mentioned that some of the frameworks and roadmaps were developed in conjunction with Bloomberg, and Kuala Lumpur has had some of that same partnership with Bloomberg and C40 cities. So I just wanted to put it out there. If you're looking for global partners for municipality, I'd be happy to make you make some connections and continue the conversation between Kuala Lumpur and Atlanta in terms of knowledge sharing. It's really interesting to see how these issues can be approached with different perspectives from around the world. CK, I know you recently engaged in a transition to an electric scooter. Do you care to share any of your experiences?
Oh, actually, I bought the Ioniq 5. It's bi-directional. It's an amazing car. I drove to Penang recently, which is about 400 kilometers away, and I actually recharged it midway at midway in near Ipoh with the 180 kilowatt DC charger. So it was charged in about 10 minutes, and off I go again. So no problem at all driving a EV. I think that 10 minutes may seem long compared to pumping petrol, but actually it's very short. It's just a short toilet break, refreshing up, and there's not enough time for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and also none of the smell and the filth associated with a gas station. I think we won't. Yeah. None of us will feel badly about leaving that experience in the rear view. Yeah. I mean, I think the bi-directional nature of EV and the fact that as we scale up EV infrastructure, it really highlights one of the great possibilities of this energy transition, which is opening up new ways of thinking about the world we inhabit that wouldn't have seemed possible just a few years ago. And looking at how we occupy our buildings, how we use energy as a resource is really changing incredibly quickly. And it's quite an exciting time, not just at municipal levels, but on a personal level as well. So next question is a little bit of a tangent, but it deals more with culture. So, Malaysia and the United States both have culinary traditions that involve particular qualities of heat from burning things. In the US, we have a tremendous barbecue tradition. Malaysia has our own barbecue tradition. And a lot of our restaurants use high heat from gas to have specific cultural culinary traditions. So I know, Sean, you presented on some electric version of woks. I was wondering, CK, if you have anything to add on this about the conversation we can have with restaurants and chefs and in our communities on converting to electrification as a cooking source. Is this a conversation that's important to have? What is the environmental impact of a wood-fired pizza oven or a charcoal barbecue?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a very interesting conversation to have with our restaurants. We even have restaurants that actually advertise that they cook with charcoal, right? To get the flavor into the noodles and the food that they serve. So to move them towards electrification, I think there's a conversation that we need to have with them to see how it can be done. I would like to hear if there's any experience from Sean on this kind of a cultural issues.
Thanks for asking, because I do work hard on how to address. I meet every week at least with groups of people to talk about electrification. And so I'm trying to figure out what exactly gets people affected. And I've come to that conclusion that the fact that stoves are like cigarette smoke is the thing that seems to sort of get to everybody. Or the gases that come off of stoves, they sink. And so they also affect babies and pets extra. Like it's extra bad because they're short. That's where these heavier than air gases go. And so I emphasize just how much harm it's doing to our children, our pets, just the people that we love, ourselves when we're cooking. That, and on this question of is there, in the United States, there have been lawsuits that have been successful that the American Restaurant Association has waged, saying that there weren't enough alternatives. So we actually wrote this whole book like a year ago that's public. I can put the link in there. But it's got a long list of the manufacturers of electric equivalents for kind of everything, from pasta cookers to pizza ovens to rotisseries, and even getting things like tandoor ovens for Pakistan food, where you're putting a bread that's on the side and there's charcoal that's in the bottom that cooks there, electric versions of that. And they often, for that authentic flavor, have the option of burning a little bit of wood or a little bit of charcoal for the smoke, but not as the most significant contributor of the heat as a solution. So I think that's the response is gas is pretty awesome, but induction is better. It's keeps the kitchen cleaner, isn't so much smoking. It's smoke in there. Also in American restaurants, you can put 2 pieces of electric equipment into your restaurant without having to put in ventilation, but you can't put in any gas equipment without extra ventilation. So the costs of electrifying kitchens are lower when you're looking at the restaurant scale. It just goes on, just like everything. I think that's the end. But you would have coffee roasters. So
yeah, I think Sean, part of the conversation is, and this is a little bit historic, but when we talk about environmental issues, there's sometimes a false equivalency between something that's good environmental performance and austerity. And I think this is part of the conversation that's changing, is that the having environmental performance isn't about limiting opportunity. It's not about making sacrifices. It's about increasing equitable access, changing the way that we think about the world, and opening up new possibilities. So if there are limited carve-outs for human culture and joy, it's a balance that we have to strike. I'm not going to use environmentalism as an excuse to stand in between someone and their barbecue. But that doesn't mean that it's this issue is an important part of that conversation, because it gets to the core of how we live, what we appreciate, and that those trade-offs are sometimes a little bit red herrings. The idea of range anxiety in an electric car, is real, but is that a barrier to adoption in a country like Malaysia, where if you drive 300 kilometers in any direction, you're in the ocean, or you're in Singapore or Thailand? The idea of taking a 300-kilometer road trip in Malaysia is a bit perverse when you get into range anxiety, as CK mentioned. So let's talk a little bit. One final question: what's the importance of electrification, in the context of a transition to renewable energy sources? Malaysia as a country is still predominantly reliant on fossil fuel for our electricity generation. About 93% of the Malaysian electricity grid comes from fossil fuel. So I was hoping I could talk to the panel about what partnerships are important to not just ensure that we transition to an electrified future, but that this transition corresponds with a more holistic approach that leads to decarbonization. I think, Chandra, you mentioned, I wrote it down because I really like the way you phrased it. Atlanta, you said we don't control our utility. In Malaysia, we have a similar phenomena. The stakeholders and the decision makers that determine the energy mix oftentimes are different from the end users of that power. So maybe can speak a little bit more about how that relationship looks like in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's, the viewpoints are definitely different. That's a real nice way to put it. So there are multiple approaches. So I talked about our Clean Energy Atlanta plan and our decarbonization roadmap. Energy efficiency is a priority for us because that is what we can control. So that is why we focus so much on electrification, from buildings to transportation, because we just got to use less first and foremost. That's number one. Expanding our Solar Atlanta program, and expanding those two things, the decarbonization, electrification of municipal, our city-owned stock, and working with our business community to do the same, to drive on our multifamily developments and commercial, and then being able to drive those similar programs in partnership with our residents and constituents, which is like what we're doing through our Weatherize program, partnering on EV charging infrastructure expansion. So that's the stuff we can control, is how much we use. And then paired with that, we definitely intervene at our Public Service Commission. So as a city, we join with other local governments to make sure, and we're constantly in partnership with our utility, right? Because we can't get our electricity from anywhere else. So we're partnering with them on programs, but at the same time, we are clear about putting forward our policies, like the 100% clean energy plan, like our decarbonization plan, to say, hey, here's what we are doing as cities, here's what we need from the utility, here's how we think it should be done, and being active in those. Our regulatory cycle is on a 3-year calendar. So every 3 years, our utility goes in front of the Public Service Commission and they put forward their integrated resource plan, which is a 20-year plan, but it gets updated every 3 years. And so we are in those engagements. We're at the commission, talking with commissioners, talking with legislators, doing the whole thing on the advocacy side and on the community education side. So they get involved with us and on their own, because a lot of people just don't know who controls their utility bills, right? they get their bill in the mail and they think, oh, this is what it is. And this is what they don't know. There's like a body of people who are actually making the decision about how much that is, when they're going to get it and how they're going to get it, and that they can have a voice in that process. So that's critically important for us to come with our weight as a local government in partnership with other local governments, but to also be in alignment with like the advocacy organizations and things like that that are also advocating in those spaces.
It's great. CK, do you have anything to add in from Malaysia perspective?
Yeah, not so much from the same perspective. I think we would like to learn more from Atlanta, how to raise the funding for this. I think all your programs are fantastic, but you need to market it. You need to sell it. For example, the green bank or green financing, right? Is the state funding part of the interest rate reductions, or how do we raise fund, and how much fund do we need to do similar things like Atlanta have done?
That sounds like another meeting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're raising it too. We're looking for innovative ways. Speaking of utilities, we are looking at a model that some other municipalities have used. So our utilities pay the city a municipal franchise fee, we call it, right? This is for them to use our right of ways and to put up street lights and these kinds of things. And they pay the city for that, a certain amount of money. So we're looking at a model right now to have a portion of those municipal franchise fees go to a clean energy fund to help us further implement and expand some of the things that we're talking about. So it's a wherever we can get it kind of approach. But definitely trying to look at, some innovative, different climate finance mechanisms and project funding mechanisms, because it's a lot, and the more people you come, the more work has to be done.
Yeah.
I think that this highlights a great point, which is, these are really big global problems. And it's important to remember that none of us can do this alone. This is entirely a collective effort. And I think that's one of the values of conversations like this, is that shared experiences from very different parts of the world help empower us to make the problem seem more manageable and solvable. So I think we're reaching the end of the time. So I just wanted to have a quick wrap up. I think we've looked at this morning how electrification can be part of our collective efforts to combat climate change. Sean presented several domestic electrification solutions, from cooking to transportation, the environmental benefits, as well as the contributions to our health and well-being. I still go back to that example. If you don't smoke cigarettes, they might give you pause to consider why you're still cooking with gas in your home. Chandra shared experiences from Atlanta, from municipal government initiatives and the importance of partnerships, working collaboratively between government departments, as well as between public, private, and community interests, and specifically on how we can mobilize to transform energy burdens into energy opportunities. I think in summary, sometimes we're conditioned to think of energy in terms of scarcity and associated costs. Fossil fuels are expensive, fossil fuels are dirty, fossil fuels can be dangerous. And I think conversations like this help illustrate how we can reframe this argument in terms of affordability and the limitless potential of renewable energy. In conjunction with energy efficiency, it really can change the way we think about fundamental principles about how our economies and communities are structured. So thanks everyone for your participation. A special thanks to our speakers and our panelists, and to everyone watching at home. Thank you for your time. Have a great morning, evening, and afternoon, everyone. Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Mitch. Well, that certainly is a very insightful discussion. So thank you everyone for your keen participation. So ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up this electrifying webinar series on transforming residential homes into efficient and sustainable spaces, I want to leave you with one key message. That is, change begins from home. The future of clean energy and sustainability is in our hands, and the power to electrify our homes and reduce our carbon footprint lies within each of us. I encourage you to take the knowledge and inspiration gained from this series and apply it in your everyday life. So the recordings of the session will be up on YouTube in the next couple of days, along with an accompanying blog post up on our website as well. So do keep an eye out. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and let's electrify the future one home at a time. Thank you, and we'll see you again on next Wednesday. Thank you.